My name is Whitney Monroe. I am 29 years old. The night I invited my family to dinner at my loft in Detroit was supposed to be a simple meal, but instead it turned into a scene where my older sister screamed that I had ruined her life while my mom begged me to save the family. I sat at the table, napkin clenched in my fist, as Vanessa pointed at me and shouted that I could fix everything in a second if I was not so selfish. A few minutes earlier, I had said one sentence that flipped our entire family dynamic on its head. I told them I was selling my lakeside lodge and that not $1 of it was going to her. My dad stared at me like I had just confessed to a crime. My mom's fork hung over her plate, and even my grandmother went quiet. If you have ever watched a family dinner explode because of money, I would honestly like to know what you did and where you are watching from, because in that moment in Detroit, it felt like the floor had dropped out from under my chair, and I was the only one who saw it coming. The wild part is that meltdown was not even the first time I shocked them. A few months earlier, at my dad's retirement party at a steakhouse in Cleveland, Vanessa and her best friend Skylar were holding court at the bar, showing off videos from some wellness retreat brand trip while my parents practically glowed. My dad's company had booked a private room, and his coworkers lined up to congratulate him, but somehow every conversation kept drifting back to Vanessa's platform. My mom tugged people toward the projector where Skylar had hooked up a slideshow of Vanessa doing yoga in expensive leggings. When I finally made it to the table, my mom gave me a quick side hug and then rushed back to help Skylar adjust the lighting. Over appetizers, one of my dad's colleagues politely asked what I did, and Vanessa laughed and said, "She is the numbers girl, she keeps track of receipts, so the rest of us can have fun, like I was their unpaid intern." Something in me snapped. I put down my fork and said as calmly as I could that I lived in Detroit, ran operations at a growing tech firm, and owned a small lakeside lodge in northern Michigan that stayed booked most of the year. The room went quiet in a way I had never felt before, and for the first time in my life, every eye at a family event was actually on me. Growing up outside Cleveland, though I was never the one anyone looked at for long, my parents loved to tell the story of how Vanessa was born with a heart defect, how they spent months in and out of hospitals, how scary the surgeries were, and how they promised themselves if she made it, they would give her the best of everything. She did make it, and they kept that promise so literally that there was not much left over for me. By the time I came along, they were exhausted and completely wrapped up in keeping Vanessa wrapped in bubble wrap. If she wanted competitive dance, she got private coaches. If she wanted a theater camp in New York, they found a way to send her. When I asked about joining a robotics club, my mom sighed and said they really needed to focus resources on Vanessa's future, and told me I was so easygoing I would land on my feet anywhere. Easygoing was her nice word for invisible. At school events, my dad bragged about Vanessa's resilience, how she was special and destined for big things, while I stood next to them, holding my honor roll certificate like a clerk holding a receipt nobody wanted. I figured out pretty quickly that if I wanted college, I would have to pay for a lot of it myself. At 15, I picked up shifts bussing tables and refilling coffee at a diner near our house, coming home late with my sneakers smelling like grease and my tips stuffed in an envelope under my mattress. My parents told people I was learning responsibility like it was a cute experiment instead of something I needed to do to have a future. The only person who saw past the surface was my grandmother, my mom's mother, Bernice Caldwell. Grandma Bernice lived in a small apartment, the kind with squeaky floors and mismatched mugs, and she did not care about trophies or follower counts. She told me to bring my pay stubs over one Saturday, sat me down with a yellow legal pad, and walked me through compound interest like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. She helped me open a basic investment account with the $800 I had saved, circled some boring index funds, and said, "Put small amounts in something solid. Leave it alone and let time do its work. You do not need anybody's permission to build a life." Those afternoons at her kitchen table felt like someone had cracked a window in a house I did not realize was suffocating me. By the time I graduated high school, Vanessa's bedroom wall looked like a shrine to her. There were framed photos from regional dance competitions, glossy magazine spreads from tiny local features, and certificates from every workshop she had ever attended. My wall was a folder on the guidance counselor's computer with scholarship applications and financial aid forms. When I got a partial scholarship to a business program in Detroit, I brought the letter home bursting with a quiet kind of pride. My parents skimmed it and immediately asked whether I could still come home most weekends to help Vanessa with her content because they were investing so much in her channel and were overwhelmed. A week later, I overheard my mom telling a neighbor that Vanessa was headed for big things and that I was good with numbers, so I would be fine wherever she ends up. That same night, lying on my bed with the door shut, I decided wherever I ended up would not be orbiting my sister. At 18, I packed a thrift store suitcase, hugged Grandma Bernice until she teared up, and left for Detroit, with more determination than belongings. Detroit was the first place where nobody knew Vanessa's heart history or Instagram handle, and nobody cared which kid was the miracle and which one was the backup. I moved into a cramped dorm downtown with two strangers and dove into my classes like my life depended on it because it kind of did. Between lectures on operations management and finance, I worked 20 hours a week at a coffee shop in Midtown, memorizing regulars' orders and rewriting case studies on napkins during my breaks. Money was always tight, but it was my tight, not a hand-me-down problem from someone else's priorities. In my junior year, a local tech startup that built event management software for Midwestern venues came to campus looking for interns. Their founder talked about wanting people who could handle chaos and spreadsheets at the same time, and I practically ran up to him after his presentation. That internship turned into a part-time job, then a full-time operations role after graduation. I was not making huge money, but I was trusted, and that alone felt like a luxury. The company grew faster than any of us expected. Detroit venues loved working with a local firm instead of a coastal tech giant, and word spread to other cities. I built spreadsheets that turned into new policies, figured out why certain venues always churned, and built systems that made us look bigger than we were. 2 years in, the founder called me into a conference room and offered me a choice between a larger salary bump or a small slice of equity. I could hear my grandmother's voice in my head telling me to think long-term, so I took the equity and kept living like a broke 20-something for a while longer. It paid off. A larger West Coast company eventually bought us out, and even my little percentage turned into more money than I had ever seen at one time. Combined with the slow, boring gains from the investments I had been feeding since that $800 at Grandma's table, I suddenly had enough to think beyond rent and student loans. While my coworkers booked vacations and car upgrades, I spent my nights scrolling through commercial listings, wondering what it would feel like to own something tangible. That is how I found Blue Harbor Lodge. It was a cluster of weathered cabins and a main lodge on a clear lake in northern Michigan, a few hours' drive north of Detroit, run by an older couple who were ready to retire. The photos online did not scream luxury, but the reviews did, families talking about coming every summer for 20 years. Fishermen posting sunrise pictures, city people thanking the owners for peace and quiet. The books showed steady income but also room for improvement. With help from a calm, no-nonsense broker named Derek Shaw, I scraped together a down payment, secured financing, and bought the place. I hired the existing manager to stay on, rebranded the lodge, updated the website, and quietly leaned into social media just enough to attract new guests without turning it into some loud party spot. Blue Harbor started bringing in more money than my salary on good months, but to my family, it did not exist. I did not tell them because I knew exactly how that conversation would go. A few minutes of shock, a lot of questions about how they could use it, and then a fresh round of resentment the first time I said no. While I was quietly building in Michigan, Vanessa was loudly building a persona in Cleveland. She rebranded herself from Miracle Child into a wellness influencer, posting endless yoga flows, smoothie recipes, and day in my life vlogs, featuring products she barely used. Skylar, her best friend since high school, became her unofficial manager and hype woman, forever popping up in stories saying things like, "We are manifesting big brand energy this year." My parents were obsessed. Every call from them turned into a recap of Vanessa's follower. Count the latest collaboration, the influencer events in Columbus or Chicago, where she had networked in the corner of a sponsored rooftop party. When they remembered to ask about me, it was always, "Is that corporate thing in Detroit still going?" Okay said, with the tone you would reserve for a hobby pottery class. The only person outside of work who understood what I was building was my friend Elise Warren, a UX designer I met at a coffee shop when we kept reaching for the same outlet. She knew about the lodge long before my family did and treated it like the serious business it was, not a quirky side project. The first time she was at my place and heard my mom on speakerphone lightly suggest I move home until you figure out what you want to do, Elise looked at me like she finally understood the particular kind of exhaustion I carried. That retirement party that set so much of this in motion was in Cleveland at a fancy steakhouse my dad's company reserved for his send-off. The room was full of his coworkers, men in suits, who had watched him climb the ladder over decades, and I had genuinely wanted to show up for him. But somehow, even that night, the spotlight drifted to Vanessa. She and Skylar camped out by the bar showing clips from a wellness retreat, where they had gotten a discounted stay in exchange for content. My dad beamed as he told anyone who would listen that Vanessa was this close to landing a national campaign, although he could not explain what that actually meant. When one of his colleagues turned to me and asked what I did, my mom jumped in and said I was good with spreadsheets and kept everyone organized like I was her assistant, and Vanessa burst out laughing. "She is the numbers girl," she said. "She keeps track of receipts, so the rest of us can have fun." That was when I set my fork down and said in a level voice that I ran operations at a tech company in Detroit and owned a lakeside lodge in northern Michigan that was booked most of the season. The silence that fell over the table was almost funny. They did not know what to do with that information at first. My dad blinked as if I had spoken another language. My mom asked, "In your name," like she could not quite picture it. Skylar tilted her head and asked about the brand vibe of the place, already calculating. Vanessa went from smirking to squinting, and I could practically see her rearranging the world in her head, trying to place this new piece of data into the story where she was always the star. "You should partner with me," she announced loudly. "I could host retreats there, do sold-out weekends, grow our brands together." That R landed heavy in my chest. I smiled tightly and said I would think about it, which everyone at that table, including her, knew meant no. On the drive back to Detroit the next day, she texted me a stream of half-baked ideas about yoga weekends and content packages. I put the thread on mute. For a few days, I let myself enjoy the petty satisfaction of knowing something they did not, and the deeper satisfaction of having built something sustainable. Then my phone buzzed with a credit alert that made that satisfaction evaporate. The notification said there had been a new inquiry on my credit for a personal line of credit from a bank I did not use. At first, I assumed it was a spam text, but when I logged into my credit monitoring account, I saw it, a pending application for a $25,000 credit line with my name on it, tied to an address in Cleveland, listing wellness studio expansion as the purpose. The email associated with the application was almost my address, just one letter swapped, and the uploaded driver's license was a photo of me from years ago that I vaguely remembered taking for an apartment application. My stomach dropped. I tore through my old folders and cloud backups and realized exactly how this could have happened. Years earlier, when I had been helping Vanessa apply for her first basic credit card, we had scanned both of our IDs on my laptop and thrown them into a shared folder she never bothered to delete. Only 3 people knew my entire social security number, and the way my signature loops at the end: me, my grandmother, and my sister. The list of suspects was very short. I took screenshots of everything and called Elise, who showed up at my loft 20 minutes later with takeout bags and a legal pad. We sat at my kitchen table while I pulled up every bank account and email address I had looking for other surprises. We found a welcome email from the same bank routed through the fake address, plus a draft of a contract where I agreed to automatic payments buried in the spam folder. There was also a half-completed application for a smaller $12,000 line like someone had been testing the system. Elise looked at the pile of evidence and said in a voice that was calmer than the anger in her eyes, "This is identity theft, Whitney. You need a lawyer now." The next morning, I was in the office of Patrice Allen, a Detroit attorney who specialized in exactly this kind of thing. Patrice clicked through my screenshots, asked a few focused questions, and then said, "We are freezing your credit today, filing an identity theft report with the Bureau, and notifying the bank's fraud department. If you decide to pursue charges later, you will have a solid trail." Hearing it laid out in simple professional language made the betrayal feel both more real and less surreal at the same time. While Patrice handled the formal side, I did my own quiet investigation. One of Vanessa's former classmates who followed both of us online forwarded me a thread of messages where Vanessa had bragged to Skylar Whitney landed serious money with that lake place. "I have got a line in her name coming through, it will be fine." Skylar had responded with rows of laughing emojis and a warning to make sure she never sees the paperwork. I called my mom hoping there was some explanation that did not involve my sister casually planning to saddle me with debt. My mom sighed and said I was misunderstanding that Vanessa was under a lot of pressure and probably assumed I would co-sign or help her get started like families always did. When I said the words identity theft, she flinched and then immediately tried to soften it. "You know your sister has always struggled with money," she said. "Can you not just talk to her instead of making it a legal thing?" I hung up before I said something I could not unsay. That night, staring at the dashboard for Blue Harbor Lodge, I realized just how exposed I really was. If Vanessa was desperate enough to forge my name for a line of credit, what would stop her from sniffing around the lodge next? The asset I had been so proud of suddenly felt like a target painted on my back. I called Derek and asked as neutrally as I could what the market looked like for a lodge like mine if I wanted to explore selling. Tourism to northern Michigan had exploded in recent years, and he said there were regional hospitality groups looking to buy established properties with loyal customer bases. He thought he could get strong offers. While he quietly tested the waters, I went to a networking event in Detroit that I almost skipped, hosted by a local nonprofit working with youth entrepreneurs. A man named Lionel Briggs got up to speak about the program he ran that helped teenagers from overlooked neighborhoods start tiny businesses, everything from sneaker cleaning services to pop-up food stalls. He talked about how one small grant and one adult who believed in them could change a kid's trajectory. Listening to him, I felt something in my chest ache, in a way I recognized from those afternoons at my grandmother's table, that combination of hunger and possibility. After his talk, I introduced myself, mentioned that I had built a lodge business as a younger woman, and asked what someone like me could realistically do to help. Lionel grinned and said, "Money is great, but real experience is gold. Kids listen when you have actually built something." On the drive home, an idea started knitting itself together. What if I turned the one big asset my family wanted to strip mine into a tool for kids whose families never saw their potential at all? While the idea was forming, Vanessa's carefully curated world started to crack in public. A wellness brand out of Columbus hired her to produce a series of videos around a new product line, paying her an advance and covering travel and studio time. She pocketed the money-missed deadlines and treated their project like an optional side quest. Someone at the brand recorded a call where she snapped that they should be grateful to have access to her audience, and that if they pushed too hard, she had a backup plan in the form of her loaded little sister in Detroit. That audio ended up on a gossip account, then on half the wellness pages in the region. Sponsors quietly dropped her studios, stopped inviting her to guest teach, and the collaboration pipeline dried up. Skylar tried to save herself with a Notes app apology posted to her feed, claiming she had enabled Vanessa's unhealthy spending and needed to step back. but brands did not want either of them. My parents called me in a panic, not about the casual way Vanessa had offered up my money like a credit card, but about the lawsuit the Columbus brand was threatening. My dad's voice on the phone was tight as he laid it out. The brand was talking about damages in the range of $35,000 between the advance production costs and lost campaign value. He kept saying it like it was a horrific, impossible number for them and a rounding error for me. My mom chimed in about how fragile Vanessa had always been after her surgeries, as if that made forging my identity and breaking contracts more understandable. "You know, she is not like you," my mom said. "You are so strong with money, you always land on your feet. This would not even dent you. If you sell that lodge, you could clear this and she could start over. Why would you let your sister drown when you could toss her a life raft?" The way she said that lodge like it was some random toy I had stumbled onto instead of years of work made my hands shake. That night, I called Grandma Bernice and told her everything from the fake loan application to the lawsuit, to the way my parents spoke about me like I was a walking emergency fund. She listened quietly and then said, "They made choices, baby. They bet everything on one child and left you to fend for yourself. If they are drowning now, it is because they jumped into water they never learned to swim in. You are not obligated to go under with them." That conversation is what pushed me from maybe to absolutely. 2 weeks later, I invited my parents, Vanessa and Grandma, to dinner at my loft in Detroit. I also asked Elise to come, which took my mom by surprise when I mentioned it. "Why would your friend be there?" she asked. "This is family business." I told her I needed someone in the room who was not invested in rewriting history afterward. When my mom asked if Aunt Gloria or Uncle Raymond could come for support, I said no. I spent the day before roasting chicken, chopping vegetables, and trying to keep my hands from shaking while I set the table. On the sideboard next to the stack of plates, I placed my laptop hooked up to the TV with a single folder on the desktop labeled Receipts. It sounds dramatic, but I knew that if I did not lay everything out at once, they would twist each piece until even I questioned what I had seen. When they arrived, my mom fussed about the neighborhood like she was appraising a listing. My dad commented on parking, and Vanessa barely mumbled hello, scrolling through her phone. Grandma hugged me like she meant it and slipped a folded note into my hand that simply said, "You are not alone." We ate first because I did not want anyone to be able to claim low blood sugar later. Conversation stayed surface-level traffic whether my dad missed working every day. Elise chatted pleasantly with my grandmother and observed my parents the way she would a tricky client taking everything in. When the plates were mostly empty, I stood up, walked over to the laptop and said, "Before anyone asks me for anything tonight, I need you to see what has already been taken." On the screen, I pulled up the fake loan application, zoomed in on my name, my social security number, my childhood address, and the almost right email. I explained in simple language how someone had used an old scan of my ID from a shared folder to apply for a line of credit. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. My dad frowned at the screen, and Vanessa shifted in her chair, suddenly very interested in her nails. I clicked to the next image, the message thread, where Vanessa told Skylar she had a line in my name coming and that it would be fine. I read the words out loud. When I played the leaked Columbus call, her voice came out of my speakers dismissing the brand's concerns and casually saying she could always get more money from my loaded little sister in Detroit. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then my dad cleared his throat and said, "This looks bad." But she made a mistake. My mom echoed him, saying, "Stress made people do crazy things," and reminding me again of how much Vanessa had suffered as a child. Vanessa blurted out that she had always planned to tell me that she was going to pay everything back once her next big campaign landed, as if those words had any weight left. I shook my head. "Mistakes are when you click the wrong button on a form," I said. "This was deliberate. You knew what you were doing." I explained what Patrice had done, freezing my credit, filing the reports, documenting the fraud. My parents looked shocked that I had involved a lawyer, like the correct response to seeing my name forged on legal documents was to shrug and hope feelings did not get hurt. Before they could regroup, I opened the last file on the screen, the purchase agreement for Blue Harbor Lodge, with my electronic signature and the offered sale price clearly visible. "This is the sale contract for the lodge," I said. "I signed it this week." Vanessa shot out of her chair. "You sold it?" she yelled. "Are you kidding me? That was my future. I could have built retreats there. I could have had a whole brand. You knew that and you stole it from me." My mom turned on me like I was the one who had forged a signature. "Whitney, how could you?" she said. "You know how much your sister needs a fresh start. You are throwing her under the bus to punish her." My dad tried to sound reasonable, suggesting we find a middle ground, where I sold the lodge, paid off the lawsuit, and maybe Vanessa made payments to me over time. Elise, who had been silent so far, finally spoke. "Middle ground is where everyone shares the sacrifice," she said calmly. "So far, the only person you are asking to give up anything is Whitney." Grandma nodded slowly and turned to my parents. "I told you years ago that treating one child like porcelain and the other like a pack mule would come back around," she said. "You made that choice. She does not owe you her spine because you finally feel the weight." I turned from the screen to face them directly. "Here is what is actually going to happen," I said. "The sale will go through. After taxes and closing costs, every cent is going into a fund I am setting up with Lionel Briggs to support teenagers in Detroit who want to start businesses and who have been told they will be fine without help, the way you told me. None of it $0 is going to Vanessa, to you, or to anyone else in this family." Vanessa's face crumpled and twisted. "You are jealous," she screamed. "You have always been jealous because everything used to be about me, and now it is your turn, and you are taking it out on me. You are evil." My mom started crying, saying I was tearing the family apart. My dad muttered something about counseling and second chances. I felt oddly calm, like the part of me that used to scramble for their approval had finally stepped aside. "I am not jealous," I said. "I am done. I am done being your hidden safety net. I am done cutting pieces off my life to patch up holes you ripped in your own." Vanessa grabbed her bag, yelled that I would regret this when people heard her side, and slammed the door so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. No one followed. After she left, the energy in the room sagged. My mom sniffled and asked if there was any way we could fix this, meaning undo my decisions, and return to the script where I bailed Vanessa out, and they pretended it was normal. My dad stared at the table and said he had failed somewhere, but immediately pivoted to suggesting we attend family therapy and find compromises. I looked at them and realized I felt more tired than angry. "I do not know if you can fix how you have treated me," I said. "That is on you. What I do know is that I am finished letting your choices drain my future. From now on, my money, my time, and my energy go to people who respect me. That includes these kids in Detroit, who actually want to build something, and the friends who have shown up for me. It does not include the two of you or Vanessa." My mom reached for my hand, and I stepped back. Grandma stood up, walked over, and squeezed my shoulder. "You did right," she whispered. "You finally picked yourself." When they left, my loft felt both emptier and lighter, like a room after you have finally hauled out a piece of furniture that was too big for it. In the weeks that followed, I followed through on what I had said. I blocked Vanessa's number and muted my parents' contact info, then sent them a single email explaining that for my own well-being, I needed distance, and that any future communication about legal or financial matters should go through Patrice. They responded with long messages full of guilt and half apologies that I did not open. Grandma and I switched to letters for a while, partly because she liked writing them, and partly because I wanted something tangible to tuck into a drawer on the days I doubted myself. Derek closed the sale on Blue Harbor Lodge for just over $1.2 million, and when the funds hit my account, I walked straight from the bank to Lionel's office. We spent an afternoon sketching out the Monroe Briggs Youth Venture Fund, a program that would offer microgrants, mentorship, and basic financial education to teenagers in Detroit who had ideas but no support at home. I put the first large deposit into a dedicated account, and for the first time in months, I felt excited about money instead of stressed by it. Our Friday nights changed. Where I used to spend that time on obligatory family video calls, now I spent them in a community center conference room with Lionel Elise and a handful of teenagers whose faces lit up when they talked about sneaker cleaning businesses, custom t-shirt lines, or pop-up food stands. Elise helped them think about branding. I walked them through simple budgets and cash flow, and Lionel did what he did best, make them feel seen. We did not hand out huge amounts. Sometimes a grant was just enough for a kid to buy supplies and a small folding table. But the look on their faces when they got a yes instead of a shrug was worth more than any lake view. At the same time, Patrice kept me updated on the formal consequences of what Vanessa had done. The Columbus brand followed through with their lawsuit and won a judgment she could not pay. Without sponsorships, Vanessa could not keep her apartment, so she moved back into my parents' house. A cousin mentioned at a holiday gathering that neighbors whispered every time they saw her car parked all day in the driveway, the influencer who had crashed and burned. My parents, still determined to keep Vanessa comfortable, dipped deep into their retirement savings to help her chip away at the judgment. They sold a vacation timeshare they used to brag about and refinanced their house to free up cash. My dad, who had looked forward to fishing and sleeping in, took a part-time job consulting for a smaller supplier, not because he was bored, but because they needed the money. Skylar tried to reinvent herself online as a champion of creator accountability, making apologetic videos about toxic hustle culture. But brands did not seem eager to hire the woman who had laughed along in those leaked messages. Within a year, her public accounts faded into private profiles with only a handful of followers. None of that gave me joy exactly, but it did give me a cold, clear sense of closure. The fallout they experienced came directly from their own choices, not from anything I had done. All I had done was stop cushioning their landings with my work. About 6 months after the fund launched, I opened my mailbox and found a thick envelope with my name written in careful, looping handwriting. Inside was a letter from a 16-year-old named Mariah, one of our first grant recipients. She wrote about how people always told her to be realistic, how teachers nudged her toward safe jobs she did not want, and how no one took her idea for a sneaker cleaning service seriously until Lionel's program and our fund backed her. She described getting her first paying clients, saving for a better machine, and feeling for the first time like her ideas had weight in the world. Near the end, she wrote, "Your story about being the sister nobody believed in made me feel less crazy for wanting more. Knowing someone else fought their family and still built a life makes me think I can do it too." I sat on my couch in Detroit with that letter in my hands and felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight since I was a teenager. Every sacrifice I had made to keep my lodge out of my family's hands suddenly felt like exactly the trade I was meant to make. A few weeks later, Lionel asked me to speak at a local entrepreneurship summit. Standing on a small stage in a downtown auditorium, I told a pared-down version of my story, how I had grown up in the shadow of a golden child sister, how my parents assumed I would be fine while pouring everything into her, how I had built a career and then a lodge without their help. I talked about the day I discovered my name on a loan application I had never filled out, and the night I decided to stop being the silent safety net for people who would never acknowledge what that cost me. I watched people in the audience nod, some with their arms crossed in that way you do when a story hits too close. Afterward, a young woman came up to me with tears in her eyes and said, "That is my brother. My parents treat him like he is made of glass and expect me to pay for the pieces. Hearing you say no makes me feel like maybe I can say it too." In that moment, I realized my story was not just about my family. It was about all the people quietly carrying everyone else's weight. Now, when I think about family, I do not picture my parents' house in Ohio or the wall of Vanessa's trophies. I picture the community center room where teenagers spread notebooks across folding tables the way Elise leans over their designs with the same focus she brings to big name clients, and the way Lionel laughs when a kid talks about turning a tiny idea into something real. I picture Grandma's letters stacked in my desk drawer, each one reminding me that at least one person in my bloodline chose the truth over comfort. I do not forgive my parents for turning me into a backup plan or for asking me to burn my future to keep my sister's illusions intact. I do not forgive Vanessa for signing my name on debts she never intended to pay, or for assuming I would quietly absorb the damage. I have accepted that they are who they are and that I am allowed to be someone different. I have no contact with them, and I do not plan to change that no matter how many years pass or who gets sick or sad or scared. Cutting them off was not cruelty, it was self-defense. I spent decades twisting myself into something useful to them, hoping that if I was valuable enough, they would finally see me. In the end, the only way to be seen was to step out of their line of sight entirely. If you are listening to this and recognize yourself as the reliable one, the one your family assumes will always be there with a checkbook and a smile, I hope you hear me clearly. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to invest in your own life instead of plugging holes in ships other people keep steering into rocks. Do not let anyone convince you that setting boundaries is betrayal. The real betrayal is expecting someone to sacrifice their entire future to protect you from the consequences of your own choices. Thank you for listening to my story. Tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were in my place and where you are hearing this from, because I know I am not the only one who has had to choose herself over her family.